Welcome to this bonus episode of the Everyday Evangelism podcast series 3. We're following on from the main episode with Israel Olofinjana from the Evangelical Alliance and John Stevens from the Fellowship of Independent Evangelical Churches. Together we explored why growing in cross-cultural competence is so important as we build up the body of Christ in all of our diversity to be sharing Jesus. And this bonus content gives us a chance to dig even deeper into this topic together.
The people who have developed intercultural churches, it's taking years. In fact, most of the places I've seen leaders who have developed intercultural or who have gone on that journey, they have had to relearn what they thought they know. And that's something crucial in this conversation that I think we need to talk about. Some of the pastors that I've seen, some of them have had to either, I know of one who, so let's just take David Wise, for example. David Wise developed an intercultural church, a Baptist church, over a period of 30 years. But what brought the shift for David is as he began to listen to different people and thinking our church needs to change. And as he was trying to carry the leadership along, what he did was he brought some people to come and give feedback to the leadership to hear how things were going on for other communities in the church. And as they listened to some of the harrowing stories, the church went on a journey because they hear experiences.
So you mentioned David there, just to say he's going to be coming on a future episode as we begin to unpack the how. If you like, if we've been looking at the why, he's going to begin to help us unpack a bit more the how on a future episode.
And so David and the leadership went on this journey. But one of the things David did was he had to go back to Bible college. He had to go back. And he had to go back to do a master's in biblical interpretation to see how do you engage in intercultural hermeneutics. How do you exegete the text, understanding from different cultures in that sense? And that really helped him to develop a truly intercultural church, one of the most truly intercultural churches I've seen in the UK. And other cases I've seen, people have had to relearn. That the leaders or the pastors have had to relearn what they think they know and start almost a different journey and then carry people along. And again, we can say that happened to Peter. We talked about, Peter, having a revelation. Cornelius was the easy part for God because Cornelius was already sold out. He was already thinking of inquiring. He was already looking out for God. But to convince Peter, that's the headache that I think God had. How do I convince Peter, my chief apostle, to go on this journey? How do I help Peter to tilt, to pivot in a different direction? Because Peter's Old Testament theology was that this is clean, this is unclean. You don't mix them up. His old theology was very clear until God disrupted his theology. So we need disruptive theology on this journey so that God can break in and begin to help us. And when he had that key revelation, that was when he began to switch and God was preparing him. When you look at our whole Acts chapter 10, God was preparing Peter through different things. The journey he had to go with the Gentiles to Cornelius was a risky one. And the fact that he even stayed there was another risky journey. He ate with them. And in Acts 11, he became the ambassador to convince the other apostles because they were asking him and demanding, why did you go and eat? So Peter was the early adopter in here, and he had to go and convince the other apostles why he had to go. And I'm thinking, we talk about the success of the Antioch church in chapter 11, but if Peter didn't have that conversion, the Antioch church will not be commissioned.
One of the things you've raised that I imagine some people might hear and be alarmed by is this kind of having to go back and relearn our theology. And I imagine some will hear that and think this feels like actually in order to do this, I'm being asked to abandon some things that I hold quite dear to me. And it's just worth just digging into that for a moment. I mean, even with Peter, of course, he'd heard in Mark chapter 7, Jesus declares all foods clean. So Peter had heard something that he hadn't fully appreciated the depth of, rather than something that was actually fundamentally new in some ways. And so his journey was hearing again from Jesus something that he'd already said, but because of his history hadn't fully understood the significance of, which is maybe slightly different from I need to abandon the old way of doing things and adopt a completely new way. I only put it that way because I know some will hear that language of needing to relearn and import into that all of the theology that I've inherited and understood as being fundamental to how I understand the Christian life to be is all wrong and must go in the bin, which I don't think is what you're saying, but I think it is important to kind of just tease out the nuances there. Does that make sense, John? In terms
I think so. Put it, sort of relearning might be fully understanding the implications.
Fully
of what
understanding
you know.
the implications.
So I think I'd say in the book of Acts, there are moments of revelation of something new. So actually the giving of the Spirit to Cornelius and the Gentiles, God was showing that he was doing something new, making clear that he accepted people irrespective of their culture and not needing to be circumcised. And at one level, there is a sense in which in those first Peter and Paul, they are learning God's plan, but it has now been revealed. So Paul can talk in terms of the mystery that has now been made known, that God's purpose is to bring Jews and Gentiles together. So there's a sense in which we ought to have that full revelation, but we often don't fully appreciate it and its implications and work it out. So sometimes we need to relearn how the gospel we know ought to work out amongst the people that we're serving, and we've either forgotten or underemphasized things that flow from it.
We brought together a range of resources to help you explore this topic further. Visit our web area at lcm.org.uk/cross-cultural. Here you'll find our ebook on growing a cross-cultural church, and we'll be releasing more podcast episodes on this theme, which will be added to the web area as they launch.